I think society as a whole has not been able to recognize that they are less in control of their emotions and their biology than they think they are. I believe that your fight or flight system can kick in, and when that happens, your logical brain is designed to go offline. Global thinking versus specific thinking is really important. One time I ate an orange and then I was like, wow, that's a really good orange. I think I'm going to keep eating oranges and then I'm going to get in really good shape and then I'm going to finally get married. So like, holy cow,
must have been a hell of an orange.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah. I mean, needless to say, I didn't eat any more oranges because so much pressure. What happens is what dominates is our thoughts. Like, oh my God, I'm never going to make it as a trader, or I'm just so stupid. And really what you're doing is using each trade as a referendum, not only on your ability, but who you are as a person, like your character. And that adds so much pressure. And then that, of course, is what makes your stress hormones, including adrenaline, go up, and it throws you offline. That's really kind of what's going on. And global thinking is really dangerous for us.
Hey there, everyone. Dave Keller here with Market Misbehavior, and welcome to our latest episode of the Market Misbehavior podcast. Today, we're speaking with psychologist Dr. David Bonanno. He's the author of The Consistently Calm Trader. This is a unique episode that I hope you are going to enjoy. I know I greatly did. I studied psychology as an undergrad at Ohio State, and being able to ask a psychologist who has written and done so much work on the physical experience of trading, the psychological experiences of trading, fear, emotions, intuition, and how they all relate to a lot of the things that we talk about with investor psychology and behavioral finance was an absolute pleasure. We're going to talk about process, but really more about some of the advantages we actually have as humans if we could get out of our own way. Please enjoy this interview with psychologist Dr. David Bonanno. Super excited to be speaking today with Dr. David Bonanno. Dave is the author of The Consistently Calm Trader. I'm excited, Dr. Dave, to dig into that title and a lot of the takeaways from your book. But to start off, thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing some insights about what's happening between our ears as traders.
Oh, yeah. Great to be here, Dave. Thank you.
I really enjoyed sort of reviewing your work and getting to know your approach. And as I'm sure our viewers will uncover and our listeners will uncover, really digs into some of the physical, I guess, experiences we have in trading and in investing and how that affects us. So let's just get it right out of the gates here. Your first chapter of your book is called, and I quote, "Why Do Smart People Do Stupid Shit?" And I love that you started there because I immediately, when I read that, I'm like, all right, I'm really going to enjoy this conversation if that's how you're kicking things off. Why is that question so important to trading psychology? Why does that resonate for you?
Yeah, because I think we all can identify with times in which we've been given really good advice and it makes sense to you on a cognitive level, and then you can't follow it because your emotions get in the way. So yeah, even when I was young, that's just has been something I've been obsessed with, figuring out, like, I'm a smart guy. Why do I keep doing stupid shit? And so yeah, I think what really kind of happens there is your logical brain is in charge, and you do have inhibitions and you do have willpower, but that doesn't mean that you can control yourself in any given situation, especially when the pressure's on. And then for me personally, I would get good advice from people and I wouldn't be able to follow it. So it made things worse. It made me feel worse about myself, and then injected more emotion into the equation, and then I would make more mistakes. So yeah, I think, with trading, on either like day trading or on a longer interval scale, your emotions are definitely going to be part of it. And just because we don't understand it doesn't mean that it's not true.
Mm. And what's so funny, just the way that you sort of lay things out through the conversation in your book. I feel like for a lot of traders, you feel like more knowledge sort of gets you out of your own way, right? It's like if you just study it hard enough, you just read enough books, then these problems aren't a problem anymore. And I've lectured on behavioral finance at elite institutions in North America, and I still make bonehead mistakes in my own portfolio. So why is there that mismatch between And I guess why do we assume that more knowledge is the solution when in reality it in some ways could be getting us into more trouble, because then we feel that guilt about just knowing better but not doing better, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. So most trader psychology is focused on cognitive behavioral psychology, which is
Sure.
about how to change your thoughts. And the assumption is that you you're in a situation, you interpret it with your mind, and then you have an emotional reaction. But I think it's different. And I believe that your fight or flight system can kick in. And when that happens, your logical brain is designed to go offline. So I believe that adrenaline is the enemy of every trader. And, like with anything else in life, if you work harder, you're probably going to do better. But with trading, you need to be able to show like tons of restraint. So yeah, I learned all this stuff by working with people with PTSD, and I found that when they would go into fight or flight, and of course it's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, and you're like, if you are in a crisis, you're supposed to be acting or reacting. And of course, one reason that AI will never replace us traders is because it doesn't have the intuition, it doesn't have the creativity and just like being able to do things and make split second decisions in the moment. So yeah, I think a lot of people understand their thoughts and thinking, and it's not scary at all. But when you get into the subconscious, then it gets kind of crazy, and we've heard about Freud, like talking some crazy shit. But I think he was really onto something, of course. And if we can learn to recognize our emotions and then be able to somewhat control them, that's how you're gonna. What's always fascinating to me is that battle, right? Like where you get into a situation where you just want to click and you don't feel good. Like if you have that struggle of should I click or should I not? Cognitively, you shouldn't, but just being in that state of mind is so unpleasant that you could either run away from your computer, but people don't do that, or they just can click, and then you regret it afterwards. So like oftentimes it's just a release of tension. And so what I do with people is I don't help them to win the battle, I help them to prevent the battle in the first place, and then everything just goes so much smoother.
A number of things you just said there, I feel like I want to have another hour kind of digging into, because there's some really interesting points in there already. What? So just really quickly to go back to that, I had mentioned, fight or flight mechanism, and which is, if you've studied psychology, that's one of those basic kind of, I feel like building blocks, things you learn about. But you said fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Can you clarify for those that have not heard of those other two Fs? What are those four different mechanisms?
Right. Yeah. So we all tend to have a certain style of reacting to like adrenaline or
Yeah.
crises. And so like, yeah, if you were, for example, traumatized and you were able to fight, then that's what you're going to do. If you did not have that option and you could run away, then that's what you're tempted to do. Of course, it's a little more complicated than this. And then people, have had different experiences in different situations. Freezing does totally happen. That's like uh, what happens when you cannot do anything. So like if you're
Mm,
getting bit by a shark, which I've always been afraid of, what happens is you freeze, your parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous systems fire at the same time, and you're really kind of numb and you're not doing anything. And like when you watch Shark Week, you don't have these people saying like that shark. They're like, yeah, well, I was just, hey, why'd you bite my arm off? Like, so that's what happens when you're freezing. And of course, when you're trading, that can
mm.
lead to inaction. You're just paralyzed. And then fawning is something that people do with people in power. It's you could look at it as evolutionarily advantageous. That like for me, like I had a crazy mom, so like if I'm around a strong woman, I'll just kind of defer to them and like, oh yes, yes, ma'am. That's what
Right.
fawning is.
No, that's really helpful, and especially, I don't know if there's a good parallel for fawning in trading. There probably is, but freezing, I mean,
Yeah.
immediately, right? It comes to mind that that inaction and you're paralyzed. And we often talk about analysis paralysis, and all of a sudden you're unable to take any action. And in trading, as you probably know, right, the inability to take action is a decision on its own, right? You're deciding to not engage with the markets. In some cases, that can actually be one of the better things that you do, but other times it could be quite challenging, particularly when you have missed
Oh,
opportunities.
and I hope you don't mind me correcting.
Yeah,
It's not
please.
it's not deciding to be inactive. That's my whole thing is this is not a cognitive thing. So it's not
Right.
that you're weak-willed or that you are stupid. It's that you're following your wiring. So yeah, that's just what happens. It's a natural response.
Thanks for mentioning that, and I appreciate it. You're 100% right, and I would say that was one of my takeaways from reading the book. There's a vulnerability that I think you encourage us all to have, is just recognizing how out of control we are with a lot of these things that feel like bad decision making, and it's more what we're wired to actually do. I would say
Right.
you'd mentioned adrenaline, Dr. Dave, and I think. And one of the quotes that I wrote down, adrenaline is the enemy of every trader. I feel like trading in particular, there's often this sort of paradigm of the adrenaline junkie, right? Someone just like desperate for adrenaline, just the rush that you get from trading. But you talk about some of the negative impacts about adrenaline. What does adrenaline actually do to our decision making when we're trying to make a decision in our portfolios?
Yeah, I think what it does is it lessens the degree to which we're using our analytical brain. And
Mm.
so, even excitement, in my opinion, is harmful because it's like you're just going to be thinking that you could do anything, and you're going to try too hard, and it takes you offline. One time, I was talking to a combat veteran, and I said, I could never do that, and he said, Yeah, you could because you get trained. I mean, that they drill it into you so much, and so the training takes over for your analytical decision making. And in the absence of that, I mean, how do you do that with traders, right? I mean, if you're practicing like on sim or with a prop firm, it's not quite the same thing because there's the pressure isn't really there. It's sort of like, if you're a basketball player, you could practice every single day, but then once you get into a game, that's a little bit different. So yeah, like there's not really a way, as far as I can tell, to train people like a combat veteran. But what I do is my therapy interfaces with the subconscious mind. So like, if you could imagine hypnosis, although I don't do hypnosis, you're not in any type of trance or anything, but with hypnosis, you can have this huge breakthrough, which is so much better than, hey, you really should calm down when you're trading. So yeah, like that's in my opinion, that's what happens. We all know about flight or freeze, but the thing that is really important to remember is it's designed to take your brain offline, your analytical brain to some extent.
It's so funny, and one of the quotes that I remember reading through the book was sort of relating, telling someone to make decisions without fear is like telling an alcoholic to get sober or something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but I thought that was a really interesting parallel. If anyone's familiar with recovery, that definitely resonated as you sort of explain that. But I feel like that is such the common natural, I guess, advice that people feel like they should give is just don't be so afraid, right? Be confident and just sort of get around it. Why is that sort of our natural approach, and why does that fail so quickly, right?
Yeah. So, if you look at the origins of psychology, like Sigmund Freud, he discovered that with his patients, as they talked about their trauma, they were releasing it because they had been keeping secrets for most of their lives, and it felt really good to do that. Well, the assumption that every psychologist has made since then, and everybody still does, is that the more you talk about stuff, the more you're releasing it. I think you're
Mm.
rehearsing it. So what I'm talking about is that when people have the ability to sometimes change their thoughts, and it works, they are assuming that that's going to work for every single situation. So like even one time
Mhm.
I had a therapist say to me, the past is in the past, so it doesn't really make sense for you to continue to react to it. I'm like, yeah, no shit. What the do you think I'm still doing on your couch? I mean, like, what are you doing? So I think society as a whole has not been able to recognize that they are less in control of their emotions and their biology than they think they are. It's really kind of scary
Mm.
to admit to yourself that, yeah, I'm going to be in fight or flight. I'm going to have to make these split decisions, and it's going to be like coming from my natural subconscious, as opposed to like, oh no, I'm super smart across every situation. I can control myself, and I'm going to be, super analytical.
Yeah. Dr. Dave is so funny. I studied psychology as an undergrad at Ohio State, so I have nowhere near the experience or expertise that you do at even remotely. But I did study some of them, and I definitely remember my professors not being huge fans of Freud. You're sort of reminding me of the positive, right? Because there's some sort of darker, stranger stuff in Freudian psychology, but some really, I mean, grounded in some really interesting takeaways. And you're reminding me of the good part. So I might dust off the Freudian book and sort of get back into it a little
Yeah,
bit.
good. Yeah.
One of the lines that I really love that you hit on, you said state beats thought. And I thought that was an interesting way of describing it. Can you explain what you mean by that phrase? How does that relate to what we've been talking about?
Yeah. So, sometimes people think like, well, they should meditate, or they should like go for a run before they trade, or they should, try to get into the zone. And that, those are not bad things. But what I'm really talking about there is your emotional state. Like if you are revved up in any real way, then that's not going to be good. If you're trading to feel good, which a lot of us do. Like if you're down for the week, then and you just want to feel good. I mean, you're more likely to force trade. So, and then of course, there's gambling addicts. But if you're trading to make money and you're able to get out of your own way, then that's how you got to be. It's like a flow state. When
Mhm.
people are like doing something, like for example, a crossword puzzle, and then 15 minutes went by, and you like, whoa, and it was fun. But you're really just you're letting your brain work the way it's supposed to, with both parts in sync. So yeah, like if people of course you got to have a system, and it's good to read about the technical stuff, but so many people think that that's what's wrong, and no, it's not. It's your biology, and it's not, doesn't mean you're crazy. It's just how it works.
That's really interesting. And the parallel for me with a background in technical analysis, there's a lot of what you do is just look through hundreds, if not thousands of charts, right? And just sort of get the charts up and kind of go through them. And there's this moment where it really is sort of a flow state where you just sort of, things all of a sudden just start to click, right? And you just sort of getting it as you go through those things, each of those. You talk a lot about some of the, again, the psychological backing, right? And fear comes up quite a lot. But one of the things that you talk about is that how fear, rarely sort of presents itself in the form of fear. It sort of is reflected in overthinking, in perfectionism and things like that. Why do you think that distinction is important on how that fear is, I guess, manifested in our trading?
Yeah, a lot of times we are not totally in touch with that, and our thoughts are dominating our mind. And one thing that I
Mhm.
really try to help my clients with is global thinking. So global thinking versus specific thinking is really important. If like one time I ate an orange, and then I was like, wow, that's a really good orange. I think I'm going to keep eating oranges, and then I'm going to get in really good shape, and then I'm going to finally get married. So like, holy cow, like
This must have been a hell of an orange.
yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, needless to say, I didn't eat any more oranges because so much pressure. So I think like, for example, let's say somebody is gearing up for retirement, and they really are, have some valid concerns about what are they going to be doing, and how they're going to support themselves, and how are they going to, like provide safety and freedom for their wife and their family, or of course their spouse. So yeah, like I think what happens is what dominates is our thoughts. Like, oh my God, I'm never gonna make it as a trader, or I'm just so stupid, or like, and really what you're doing is using each trade as a referendum, not only on your ability, but who you are as a person, like your character, and that
Mhm.
adds so much pressure. And then that, of course, is what makes your stress hormones, including adrenaline, go up, and it throws you offline. I mean, so yeah, I think a lot of times the best thing we can do is to not make things worse. But that's what I'm talking about. Like, I might even suggest to my clients, like, oh, well, so you have a fear of not being able to make your wife happy by taking her to Europe. And he's like, well, they don't quite get it, but that's really kind of what's going on. And global thinking is really dangerous for us.
Yeah, global thinking. I love those. Some really interesting examples. And I won't. What's so funny about doing a podcast? You can't ask for a show of hands from the audience, but I feel if we did right there, everyone would identify that in some large or small way. Um, you talk in your book about sort of some of the classic different responses that traders tend to have, right? Chasing performance is an example that comes to mind. In your experience, do you find that most traders tend to fall into predictable emotional patterns? Or are we all kind of making the same mistakes? And if so, why not? Why has that come out of your experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that the one big commonality is that people have trouble accepting losses. Like,
You-
because I mean, even if you're like somebody who's too tentative, it's because you're fearing that. And then, when somebody is revenge trading, which is, of course, really common, it's because they just can't handle the losses. So, that's one thing that I really work on with my people in terms of their subconscious reaction to it. But there is one way that you guys at home can really start to practice changing your thoughts about it, which is to be sad. And I know that sounds like so different from anything you've ever heard, perhaps, but if you're angry that the market didn't do what you wanted it to do, or disappointed, or resentful, or just like not happy with your life, including the market, you're not really living in reality. So
Mm,
even if you feel guilty about what you did, even though you thought at the time it was a rational decision, guilt is also not reality. It's like, well, I would have done the right thing if I knew to do the right thing. So what I'm saying is, like, if you could be sad, excuse me, you are accepting what happened. And what happened is
mm,
you were powerless in the moment to do the right thing, and you're powerless now to go back in time and change it. So get over yourself. You didn't have the power, and you need to be sad. People actually need to cultivate the ability to be sad. And I think here in the United States, that's kind of like un-American, be sad. Like, we don't have limits. We can just like pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and don't admit mistakes and like just keep the tough get going when the going gets tough. No, just be sad, lick your wounds, and then you can move on to the next trade. So,
that's so well said, and I really appreciate you talking about that, right? And your work and just some of your comments there remind me a lot of Brene Brown's work, which
yeah.
for me is a huge compliment. I hope you take it as such. But
Yeah.
her book on imperfection was just so helpful for me, just realizing how much you need to embrace your humanity and your imperfection as an investor, and that was a therapeutic set of points to go through. And it strikes me as you're talking, it's also very much part of the traditional masculine role, right? That you don't make mistakes, that you are, you don't have to, deal with emotions, right? I mean, you just sort of trade out of it. And I feel like there's this natural bravado for a lot of traders who are, primarily male that sort of struggle with that as well. That comes to mind.
100%.
Well,
Yeah.
tell me about this then. I mean, a lot of your work is certainly seems to be helping traders get out of their own way. And I'm curious if you found that there are certain personality types or types of people that tend to be more, um, you know, um, I guess more vulnerable to mistakes that you're seeing, or are there certain personality types or I guess paradigms where people tend to have less problems with it and tend to be more successful?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I haven't seen too many like strict patterns.
Okay.
Like, cause like, for, I had this client, who would just get angry a lot, and he put so much pressure on himself. And then that just added so much adrenaline to the equation. And then he was just, he was really successful in his other career. and he worked really hard, and he needed to be angry at times in order to succeed. But this was the worst thing for trading. I also had another guy who was so analytical. I mean, of course, you need to be analytical and you need to be somewhat dispassionate, but that absolutely doesn't mean you need to be a robot. I mean, you need to care in order to do your job, and you need to use your intuition. But this guy I'm thinking of was so analytical that he just he really needed a paradigm shift. I mean, for him, things were right or wrong. Like he was very, he was a math teacher. And so there's just black and white. I mean, like, and I was like, yeah, but you probably did the right thing, but it just didn't go your way. And he was like, no, I was wrong. And like, dude, so, I mean, yeah, sorry, I don't have a great answer for that. I don't see like necessarily these distinct patterns when it comes to that so much.
I guess that's reassuring then that we're all probably going to run into these no matter how we're wired, which is it's certainly how it felt to me as I was reading a lot of your insights. You've mentioned intuition a couple times, Dr. Dave, and I'd love for you to, there's this whole obviously global shift toward AI, and AI bots are going to kill trading and investing because they're just going to be better at it because they don't have to deal with fear and emotion, or at least that's one of the ways of thinking about it. But you sort of flip that script a bit and talk about the importance of intuition. What can you talk about some of the advantages of not being a robot? Is there hope for what that means for us as traders and investors trying to, make good decisions?
Yeah, I mean, if AI were to take over, then they would all be figuring out the same stuff at the same time, and then that would affect the price action like crazy. I have a friend who trades crypto, and he went to school with me to be a psychologist, but he ended up day trading, and he said that his psychology background really helps him to understand the market very much. So yeah, when it comes to intuition, well, it's not just for day trading, although with day trading, you're making these split second, I keep mixing that up, but, under pressure, and you have to get out of your own way. It is kind of like, let's say a police officer, they have their training and they have to make these split second decisions all the time. And so they have to they can't analyze. You don't have enough time to analyze. So sure, AI can do that, but if you're in the woods and you run into a bear, you're not going to have time for your analytical brain to weigh the options. What are the pros and cons? What's the cost benefit analysis of each one? You need to be running away or fighting if you're super tough like me. But so that's really just how it works. Like it's there, like in psychology, they call it the low road versus the high road. The high road being, and it's funny they call this the high one because everybody wants to identify with their smarts as opposed to their emotion, their head versus their heart.
Sure.
And so yeah, like you really got to be in touch with the low road. You have to, like as the session's going, you're not reading how to trade, how to use my system. You're not reading about technical stuff. You have to like trust that it's in there, and then you just gotta do what you got to do.
I love that. In my opinion, I mean, reading, some of your work, it was encouraging that there's hope for us, right? And which I think is pretty good, because I know it can feel helpless, certainly if you're struggling with the emotional side of what we're doing. You talk a lot about the physical experiences that you have, the fear, the adrenaline, and some of the structures and how that is affected by the decisions that you're trying to make. What are some of the signs that that a trader's nervous system is becoming dysregulated and that problems are happening? Like, what should people be looking for to sort of recognize that?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And it's really difficult, more than you would think. It's more difficult than people would think. You're able to rationalize stuff for yourself all the time. I mean, so like, should I click or shouldn't I? Well, you can, if you ask your brain a question, it's going to answer. It's very literal. So if you ask yourself, why am I not making money? Your brain's not going to say, oh, don't worry about it. You're smart. You're special. You're a good person. You just hang in there. Your brain's going to be like, well, because it's going to give you a whole bunch of reasons for that question. So if you're saying like, well, why should I click? You're going to come up with reasons for that. I'm sorry, I forgot what the question was.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about
Yeah,
your
I'm sorry.
nervous system, right? Becoming dysregulated.
Yeah, or when you're going on tilt, like, and that's not something
Yeah.
that even necessarily has to happen in a few minutes. Like, I know somebody who lost $3.5 million over the course of a month and a half, and he was just like in a bad way, and he was coming into it every single day, like, I gotta get this back, and so, like with anger management, for example, what that is, it's not what do you do once you're in fight or flight? Once you lose your cool, what do you do then? It's about recognizing that you're getting there. So you have to have that awareness and then preventing that from happening in the first place. So yeah, like I try to help people to be more in touch with their bodies. Like one guy I know, he finds, oh my God, my shoulders are up. I really need to like just calm down a little bit. But yeah, like it can be really difficult. I don't think that people should feel too bad about becoming emotional and then not even realizing it, because your logical brain is what's in the foreground and all your thoughts are in the foreground. And you need to just really kind of ask yourself very difficult questions. What's kind of funny to me, Dave, is like how somebody could be trying to get you to make a change in your life, like your spouse and your family, and you're like, yeah, you could kind of put them off. But then when the market sort of like reveals their problems, they're like, oh my gosh, I got to be a better person.
The ultimate therapist, the financial markets. I don't know if I'd agree with that, but you certainly learn about yourself, right? When you're going through some of those experiences. So you made some great points in there about, a lot of this, I think feels like there are obvious mistakes that we make, ways that emotions get the best of us, that the fear gets the best of us. So what do you do after that? But you just alluded to, what can we kind of do to get ahead of that and try to not get in a bad place as we're trading? Can you give an example of like a routine or a habit that you try to encourage people to do to try to sort of prevent, sort of the train going off the tracks? What are things that, an example of something you would encourage someone to do to just kind of get in a better mental place for trading?
Okay, so yeah, I am not against meditation or exercise, of course, but it's definitely not the answer. And I don't want people to think that it is, and that there's something wrong with them if it doesn't work. Like if I were a cancer doctor and one of my patients said, should I take vitamins? We're like, yeah, of course. But vitamins are not the cure for cancer. So
Yeah.
what I do is, it's based on this therapy called EMDR, which a lot of people have heard of it. It uses eye movements, but with EMDR, it's really focused on trauma and it can be super painful. I use eye movements in my work with people. And what I mean by that is you keep your head still and then you follow a stimulus with your eyes and you go back and forth. You're kind of replicating rapid eye movement. You're also kind of connecting the left and right hemispheres of your brain, which don't talk to each other all that much. And you can have these breakthroughs. So, I mean, it is similar to hypnosis, but of course there's no trance or anything like that. I have an online coach that is based on ChatGPT, and it can actually do the therapy to some extent. But what I encourage people to do is before a session, they move their eyes and they kind of run through this protocol and they check in with themselves. I mean, like, I'm really in my head as a guy, like I think somewhere on the spectrum. And I used to have, therapists say to me, like, what are you feeling in your body? I'm like, I don't know, lady. But with this, if you're moving your eyes, it really does help you to get in touch with your emotions, what's going on there, try to help you to reset yourself. And that's a great way. And then if I could just say, with journaling, of course, that's a really good idea, but that's all your logical brain. So when you're going back and looking at what you did in the session, you're not aware of what was happening for you subconsciously, because by definition, it's not conscious. So what you're doing is you're guessing at what you were thinking, feeling, and at what you were feeling and doing. And then it's not going to be very logical. So if you were to journal as you're moving your eyes, like, so you move them, you check in with yourself, then you write stuff down. That's how you really get in touch with what was happening. It's so much more accurate. I mean, you may have heard coaches say like, okay, well, right after the session, you got to do it right after the session. You got to journal right after that before you get distracted by anything else. But they're trying to accomplish the same thing. You're trying to have it so that you don't lose too much in translation along the way.
No, really, really interesting. And again, I love how you talk a lot about the physical experiences, because so much I feel like we think of it as all mental. And one thing I learned, again, from my limited experiences studying psychology, which I enjoyed greatly, was the psychosomatic, features, right? There's times when your mind and body were so connected. And I feel like as a culture, unfortunately, we feel we seem to underplay that connection. When I feel like when you talk to someone like you who knows, who has gone through and studied, you really learn how intimately they're connected. I know, Dr. Dave, you have a private coaching program. What would someone, what should someone expect from that? What sort of things do you do with your private clients?
Yeah, I love that. And it's not like I'm like, oh, I'm going to save this person. It's kind of like, okay, which puzzle just walked in the door, and how am I going to, help them? Like, it's intellectual challenge for me. But I do really love coaching. I used to do, so much therapy, but that was really heavy. And also with PTSD people, they don't know how to put a value on what I was doing for them. Whereas with traders, like if they tell me I lost $15,000 yesterday, then they could see that, hiring me is kind of a drop in the bucket compared to how much it would save them over the course of their career. So if people do work with me, they get as much access as they need for 8 weeks. And they can they can text me, they can call me, of course, within reason. We can meet as many times as they need to, usually online. And then they get use of the ChatGPT coach. There's like a 24 video series that I made, which attacks most of the common trader problems that there are. It's about the eye movement. And if people, there's a couple other things too. Actually, as a psychologist, I'm pretty much the only profession that could do psychological testing. So I actually use that to really help to identify things that people just wouldn't be aware of. As a matter of fact, like as you probably do, like in psychology, most of the studies are done with self-reporting, and people are notoriously bad at being able to know what the hell they're doing through life. So yeah, there's a whole bunch to it. We diagnose what's going on, and then we hit it hard subconsciously, what's happening. And then you don't even have to practice. Like, it's not something like, okay, I got this checklist. I got rules to follow my rules. Like, it's just like you kind of go into the session, your mind is free and blank, and then you do what you got to do. So yeah, it's really fun.
Dr. Dave Bonanno, thanks so much for joining us on the show today. I really appreciate you sharing some insights. We'll include a link to some of the work that you're doing about your private coaching program and some other things as well. I want to thank you so much for your book, The Consistently Calm Trader. It definitely sort of reawakened in me a recognition of how much we have physical reactions to what we're doing, that fear and how it feels. So I hope we've given viewers and listeners some ideas about how to address that. But for now, I'll say, Dr. Dave Bonanno, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you, Dave. This was great. I really had fun, and I hope that this helps people out there.
Oh, that was such a fun conversation. I feel like I wish I had more conversations like that, really digging into some of the psychological aspects of what happens when we make investment decisions. And whether you're a day trader, whether you're a position trader, or somewhere in the middle, there are so many things, universal experiences of trading and investing, right? And it all comes back to the emotional, input. It's so funny. A lot of my work is designed to help people get out of what I call an emotion-based investment process and into an evidence-based investment process. But reading Dr. Bonanno's book, The Consistently Calm Trader, really made me think about specifics about some of the emotional experiences that we have, some of the physical experiences that we have as traders, and just having a good system isn't enough, right? In some ways, that's not treating the right problem. And I hope that you got out of that conversation, some of the real challenges that you face physically. But what was so interesting when we talked about fight or flight, or as Dr. Dave described it, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And I thought that freeze one was a really interesting one as we discussed. I mean, those are not decisions, as he, I think, very appropriately corrected me. That's not a decision that you make to fight to flight, or to run away, right? To face the challenge or run away, or freeze and do nothing, or fawn, or sort of give your independence away to someone or something else. That's not a decision that we make. That is a automatic response. That is a subconscious response. And I know a lot of the work that Dr. Dave does with his private coaching clients is to help them really understand the unique specifics about their fight or flight or fawn or freeze mechanism, and what are some of the specific experiences that they're having and how they can try to address that. A lot of the stuff that I've thought about and that I've learned about this sort of in trading psychology, addresses the fact that we all make mistakes. And we talked a little bit about Dr. Brene Brown's work. She wrote a fantastic book on Imperfection, which I think is one of the best books for investors to read, to recognize that they're not perfect, right? There's this bravado where we feel like we are always going to be right, and even a confidence that we should be right all the time. And I think what my conversation here today, I hope illuminated was the fact that you don't have to believe that you're going to be right. You can accept the fact that you're going to have these responses, and that's okay. That's actually very normal for us to do it. So part of it is, how do we address some of these physical responses, the adrenaline, the fear, the panic? How do we address them after they've surfaced? But it's also about some of the things we can do to try to get ahead of it, to try to recognize that we're getting into that space. So, as he wrote, adrenaline is the enemy of every trader. Talking about some of the work that he's done with eye movements and just trying to get your body in an appropriate place, I think was really interesting. I don't know if this conversation had all the answers for how you can, fix all of this. I think for me, it was just recognizing that we don't need to be fixed. These are actually very normal human physical responses. But the really encouraging part is that there's hope. There are things that we can do to try to acknowledge those and accept those, but also to try to get ahead of them a little bit. It was very interesting to me, by the way, if you listen to some of his background that we talked about. We didn't talk a lot about Dr. Bonanno's background, but dealing with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and just people that have had these negative experiences. It concerns me that a lot of that training was somehow very good training to help traders who have their own sort of PTSD from bad experiences and bad trades and bad decisions. But at the end of the day, I found this was a really interesting one. We'll definitely include links to learn more about Dr. Dave Bonanno with some of the work that he's doing, and I encourage you to check out his book as well, The Consistently Calm Trader. We'll include a link to that one. I really enjoy and I appreciate Dr. Bonanno's team sharing a copy of the book. I really enjoyed reviewing it, and I hope you will learn more, enjoy learning more about some of these physical responses you may have, which I'm sure you've experienced in your own trading. By the way, if you want to learn more about some of the tools and techniques that, as we learned from today's conversation, they're not going to make the fear go away, but hopefully will give you some of the tools and techniques you can use to how to have a better awareness of the markets and improve that evidence-based investment process that we talk about so often. Our Market Misbehavior premium memberships could be a great opportunity for you to upgrade your decisions in 2026 and beyond. 3 great benefits to the premium membership. First off, we will teach you all about technical analysis and behavioral finance through our virtual courses. Second, we will keep you informed and educated and inspired with our weekly flight plan, our monthly chart review, and other members-only reports. Finally, you'll have full and immediate access to a member community, a community of like-minded investors where I'm able to go in there and address questions, help people better understand the markets, and develop systems and processes to encourage more thoughtful approaches and more mindful approaches to your decision making. If that's of interest, you can find more information about our premium memberships at marketmisbehavior.com/premium. I want to thank you so much for tuning into our show today. Dr. David Bonanno, really enjoyed him coming on the show. Thanks again to Dr. Dave for joining us today. If you have any suggestions for other experts to come on the show and share their expertise and their background, we're always open to ideas. Best way to get suggestions to us, go to our YouTube channel, Market Misbehavior. Drop a comment on our most recent video with any suggestions. We are all ears. and we will look for ideas from all of you. For Market Misbehavior, my name's Dave Keller, reminding you, as always, it's always a good time to own good charts. Take care, folks.